is Doug DeMuro, and today we're going to talk about the 6 cars that can get the most attention for $20,000. 20 grand is not usually seen as an attention-getting price point. It's usually like, you want to get attention, you got to spend 250 grand on a Huracan, or $500,000 on a Countach, or something like that. But I think that 20 grand, you can get more attention than you realize. And if your life goal is to be driving around in something that people are staring at and pointing at, let's talk about what you should get. Today's video is sponsored by Cars and Bids, which is my online car auction website for modern enthusiast cars. Cars and Bids has around 600,000 registered users, all excited to bid on and buy special cars like this and this and this and this. So, if you're looking to sell your enthusiast car, do it on Cars and Bids and reach a huge audience. Okay, so the 6 cars that attract the most attention for $20,000. Again, the 20K price point. You buy a Corolla, a Versa, they get no attention. You would never think that anybody spending 20 grand would be able to get the kind of attention you get in a Lamborghini. But it is possible, and I am going to use real sales from Cars and Bids of cars that are around $20,000 or less to prove that all of these attention-getting cars can be sold or bought for 20 grand. Starting with probably the most attention-y, getting-y car for this price point, the Nissan Figaro. Look at this thing. Look at this thing. We sold this Figaro on Cars and Bids for $18,000. Some actually sell for more. There are nice Figaros can sell for over $40,000, but the bulk of sales are in the like $15,000 to $25,000 price point, and it is just one of the craziest looking automobiles that you can possibly find. Is it old? Is it new? Why is it so small? Why do the tires look white? Is it a convertible? I drove around in a Figaro. We had one in the office. I filmed a video on one. We sold it on the site. I drove around in it. People lose their minds. Everyone is like, what is this thing? Everyone comes up to you. Everyone has a story to tell you or a question to ask you. And no one has any idea what the hell it is, which I think contributes to its, like attention-getting thing. You see, you drive a Lamborghini, people, they pay attention, but they kind of figure out what it is. They don't necessarily always need to talk to you. In a Nissan Figaro, they always need to talk to you. And when you drive a car that looks like this, they assume you're going to be the kind of person who will have a conversation. Like, you're not some antisocial Lamborghini owner who's revving it with flames. You're driving this bizarre green-colored weird mobile. You're sitting on the wrong side of the car. You need to be talked to, according to the general public. And I really think that in addition to this car being surprisingly nice, like the convertible is fun, it's fairly nice to drive, I love how it looks. In addition to all that, it really is an attention-grabbing, like, whoa, what the hell is that type of car? And I think it's neat. I think it's really, really special. I love it as a car, but I also love it as a thing that gets attention. Now, I will say, I don't think it would get a lot of attention from most car enthusiasts, and some of the other cars on this list will. I think car enthusiasts, a lot of them know what it is. The Figaro has kind of made its rounds. It's been 25 years old or more, so you can bring it into the US for a long time. And before that, it was actually pretty commonly seen in the UK because all the Figaros are right-hand drive. The UK market, for some reason, loves convertibles, and so it's been pretty common sort of in the English-speaking car social media world for a long time. I don't think a car enthusiast necessarily freaks out about this, but I think the general population would be very excited about virtually every aspect of the Figaro, and you can definitely turn heads and definitely get one for 20 grand, a Nissan Figaro. Okay, next $20,000 head turner. This is another very obvious one that very turns very heads. The Humvee. Yes, the Humvee. So this Humvee, you can see here, we sold on Cars and Bids for $15,000. That was about a year ago, but honestly, they don't really change in price all that much. Now, this particular one is a military Humvee. And so you could think of the Hummer or the Humvee in 2 basic classifications. There's the civilian models, which still sell for big money. 40 grand was probably a floor, and really nice ones, the very most desirable, can sell for $200,000 or more. But the military ones are not as valuable for a few reasons. Number one, the military sells them on a bill of sale. And so a lot of states won't title them, which means you can't actually drive them. But some states will, and this particular one that I'm showing you on Cars and Bids that sold for $15,000 was titled for street use by the great state of Arizona. What a surprise. And so a lot of the states that sort of have more lax rules about this stuff will give you titles for a military Humvee. But the other reason that military Humvees are less desirable than their civilian counterparts is they're very Spartan. Actually, two reasons. Number one, they're very Spartan. They don't have, like a civilian Hummer has a radio, climate control, you know, all the stuff you'd want. A military Humvee does not. It has a canvas seat, it has a steering wheel. You're lucky to get anything else. These are made for military use. They're not trying to like keep the soldiers, you know, feeling comforted when they're driving in battle. The goal is function, and it functions. The other drawback of the military vehicles is that they tend to be pretty well worn. The US government is not really in the business of trying to sell stuff unless it's kind of past its service life. And so when the military sells a Humvee, they're basically saying to you, we, the military, cannot continue justifying keeping this thing running with the budget of the Department of Defense. So here you go. And then you have to try to keep it running. And so what ends up happening is you don't. There's some stuff that fails that you just let go, specifically the central tire inflation system. The military wanted to be able to inflate and deflate the tires from the cabin, which AM General, the manufacturer, figured out. But eventually the tire inflation lines just become difficult, and a civilian never really needs to do that. And so most people just remove them. But the military vehicles, the benefit, especially for this video's purpose, is everybody looks at them. Not only is every Hummer very obvious and special on the road, it's wide, it's flat, it's weird. These are camo painted. And so these things show up, they're desert tan camo, or they're this green and black and brown, and they're camo. So it's like a Humvee that's camo. Everybody's going to stare at that, and yes, you can get one for $20,000. And amazingly, this one didn't even really seem so bad. Not only was it titled for road use, it only had 11,000 miles, and it was a 2001. And so you think to yourself, well, how much damage could the military have done? A lot of the ones they sell are from the 80s or 90s. But this is a very cool way to get a lot of attention for $20,000. And I would say that most military Humvees tend to sell in this price range. Now, what a lot of people do is they buy them, and then they paint them, and then they try to add back in some civilian nice stuff. They try to put on different wheels, make them a little bit nicer. Those will sell for a little more. But if you're willing to just drive around in the bare bones, no AC, like you're a troop Humvee, you could attract a lot of attention for 20 G's. Okay, next one. Here's one you probably wouldn't expect me to talk about, especially from Cars and Bids. The Citroen 2CV. Believe it or not, the 2CV was manufactured, even though it looks like a 50s car, it was manufactured into the 60s, into the 70s, even into the 80s. And so the result is that we have auctioned a few on Cars and Bids. We've auctioned two, and neither one got over $15,000. This 1988 Citroen 2CV sold for $15,000 on Cars and Bids, and just look at it. The 2CV is such a ridiculous vehicle. In addition to being French, it just looks absolutely absurd. It looks like a Volkswagen Beetle, but weirder and longer. And it's always strange paint colors. And the French, they couldn't make a car in this era without putting a panel over the rear wheel, which adds an element of what the hell is that? And so you look at this thing and you know it's not a Beetle. You're not sure what it is. Everyone will stare and wonder exactly what it is that you're driving. And for $20,000, this car will have an enormous impact on your standing in the look at me crowd. Now, what it will not have an enormous impact on is accelerating, because when we ran this 2CV, we said that it had a flat twin 602cc and made only 27 horsepower. Now, to be clear, the car doesn't weigh much, but 27 horsepower, it almost doesn't matter what vehicle it's in. It's not going to be going very fast. And that is certainly true in a car that has four doors, a whole body, a trunk, tires. I mean, these cars are very, very slow, but they're very, very cool. They're special, they're interesting, they're weird, they're quirky, and look at this yellow and red paint job. I mean, this is the kind of car that a French restaurant would park outside to attract attention. You could be driving it along, attracting the same attention, just very slowly. Okay, next up, cars you can buy for 20 grand that attract a lot of attention. Our next example is this 2002 Bentley Arnage T, which we just sold on Cars and Bids for $18,000. Now, I think basically any Bentley attracts attention. I know this because my friends who are not into cars will send me a picture of like an old Continental GT and be like, whoa, look what I'm behind. And I'm like, yeah, I'm like, oh, cool. But what I'm thinking is really, that's a $30,000 car. But the Arnage particularly is attention attracting because it is long, wide, big, slab-sided, boxy. Like, this is the flagship Bentley. This is not the Continental GT, which was for people who retired from a corporate executive career to a golf community, and everything is easy in their life. This is the Arnage. Nothing is easy in the Arnage owner's life. They own 19 factories in 12 questionable countries, and they're just trying to continue getting their product to market so they can fly private. That's the Arnage owner's life. And I say that in part because when this car was new, it was 350 grand, but also because when you look at the service history on this particular Arnage, it recently completed a $21,000 service. So although you can buy it in the $20,000 price point, it may be a little bit more expensive than that to keep it running. Of course, that's if you want to keep it running right. You just buy an Arnage and go for it, and you'll be just fine, I'm sure. Anyway, the point is, 20 grand attract a lot of attention. Bentleys always attract attention, but the Arnage specifically, the flagship big body Bentley, attracts the attention of, I'm going to fire your whole town. I'm going to come in and shut things down around here. I'm above the law. I can run over somebody, and I'm so rich my lawyers will get me off and the cop will apologize to me. That's the mindset you have in an Arnage. And it's the mindset that other people should have when they're around you in traffic. And these are very special cars. Now, I got to say, joking aside about the cost of ownership, these are fairly expensive to own. They're not as crazy as some people think. A $20,000 bill is high, but you don't get those as often as kind of the reputation says. And they are really enjoyable cars to own, particularly if you get an Arnage T with the turbocharged V8. This car has 450 horsepower and 650 pound-feet of torque. It will go, 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 despite its giant size. And I just find them to be tremendously enjoyable cars to drive. Big, bulky, slab-sided, refrigerator-feeling things that also have a lot of power and a lot of leather and lamb's wool floor mats, and they're just plain cool. And people think that when you're driving it around too. Whoa, there goes a rich guy. Little do they know. Okay, two more cars that you can buy for 18 grand that attract a lot of attention. Another one, now this one is a little bit more under the radar for the general public, but it would attract a lot of attention for car enthusiasts. And it's on the Bentley Arnage sort of trajectory, and that would be the V12 Toyota Century. So the Toyota Century is Toyota's flagship luxury sedan that they've been selling in Japan since like the 80s, like the early 80s, I think. And the reason they offer this vehicle, it's like a competitor to the Mercedes S-Class Maybach or the Rolls-Royce Phantom. The reason they sell it is if you're in Japan and you're in the business world, and Japan is a very large, real business manufacturing, like corporate world, you don't necessarily want to be seen driving around in a foreign car. Japan also has a giant auto industry, and if you're a Japanese executive, you don't want to be supporting Britain, the Rolls-Royce, or Germany, or whatever. You want to be seen in a Japanese vehicle. And so the Toyota Century allows you to have the luxury of a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley, but stay home market and stay in Japan. And so not only does Japanese business executives use it, but Japanese high-ranking government officials and even Japanese royalty, they're all driving around Toyota Centuries. And it was quite interesting. I was in Tokyo 5 years ago, and seeing the Centuries driving around, that was it. Chauffeur driven, never modified like they can be later. They were all just like serious businessmen doing business things. So in '96, the second generation Century comes out, and for some reason, Toyota develops a V12 specifically for this car. And I don't think it was ever used in anything else, but I've driven a V12 Century, and it was unbelievably smooth and calm and comfortable and wonderful. And car enthusiasts who know, which is a lot of car enthusiasts, already think the Toyota Century is special. But when you pop the hood and show a V12, it's going to be like, wow, a V12 Toyota. And I've seen these things show up at Cars and Coffee, and they attract an enormous amount of attention. This one here on Cars and Bids sold for $15,100. That's actually on the lower range of these Centuries. 15 to 25 is about where the V12 Centuries sell. It depends on mileage and condition. Most of them tend to be in very nice shape. They were used in the manner I described. They were maintained well, but they do get miles put on them. But you can find lower miles ones and pay a lot more. But 20 grand should buy you a Century, and a nice Century, and a V12 Century. And that's a very special car in the Cars and Coffee world. I have seen people show up with these at Cars and Coffee, and a mob forms around it. Show me that V12. Show me a V12 Toyota. No one's ever seen such a thing before. But also, show me the interior of a Japanese Rolls-Royce. These cars were never sold in North America. They've never even been conceptualized that anything would be nicer than a Lexus in North America, and that's exactly what this car is. And so people see it and they're like, wow, what is that like? How does it feel? What does it look like? And you show up at Cars and Coffee with a Gallardo or a Huracan, you park next to a V12 Century, everybody's going to be focused on that Toyota. It is a very unusual car. Now, I will say, in terms of attracting attention, when you drive around in public, not that many people are going to have any idea what it is or even really pay attention. It just sort of looks like an aging large sedan. I reviewed a V12 Century a while ago. The people who owned it told me people do stop them, but certainly not like in a Figaro or a DeLorean or a Humvee, right? However, at Cars and Coffee, at a car enthusiast gathering, this car would kill. It would be very special because enthusiasts know about it, but most people have never seen it, both the luxury aspect and the V12 aspect, and both are cool. And you can get one for under 20 grand. And finally, our very last under $20,000 car that attracts a lot of attention, the Maserati Quattroporte. The Quattroporte that was sold in the US from like 2005 to 2013, that Quattroporte is tremendously attention grabbing. And frankly, I wouldn't have thought that until our friend, our Cars and Bids friend, Nick, bought one. And you drive it around and it turns heads, it's cool, people think it's awesome, and he paid $13,000. I went and found this one that we sold recently on Cars and Bids, this 13 Quattroporte S. It sold for $13,600. And it has the improved ZF automatic transmission that makes life easier when you actually want to go and drive the car. These things look great, they sound great, they're surprisingly fast, they handle quite well, and also it's a cool Maserati. And it's just like sort of the Bentley thing. Non-car enthusiasts still get really excited when they see a Maserati. It's like, whoa! A lot of car enthusiasts have started to realize like this brand sold a lot of Ghiblis with, $499 lease deals. But people who don't really get that see this car and think, wow, this is a really special car. And I gotta say, from my perspective, the pre-Chrysler Maseratis, the Maserati Coupe in the 02, 03 era, the Maserati Spider, the Grand Sport, and then also these Quattroportes, to me, they are kind of special. They are more special than the Chrysler ones that came later. Maserati now has become a volume brand, and they've lost some of the Italian exoticness. But these cars had like leather headliners and stitching everywhere, and the Ferrari-derived V8. Like they really were kind of exotic special cars. And they were sort of temperamental, which is kind of part of the exotic special car thing. And it's very cool to see these cars, and they really do attract more attention than I would expect. And again, now that my friend Nick has his bright blue one, people really think it's a very cool, very exciting special car, even though it's really just a heavily depreciated car that basically anybody can buy for far less than the price of Nissan Versa, Honda Civic, Toyota Corolla, etc. But it still turns a lot of heads. And if you get a nice one, it actually is a pretty fun and enjoyable driving experience. But so there you go. Those are 6 cars with a $20,000 budget that you can really turn heads. You don't have to spend 100 grand on a used Lamborghini and take your life into your hands. You turn the key, you're not sure if it's going to start. Instead, buy a Nissan Figaro and attract the very same amount of attention.